Natalie was explaining, we wanted to try to use this session, not just to hear from our keynote speakers, but to capture, as well as that fantastic video you saw at the beginning, to capture a flavor of what has been happening, of the discussions around the room. And we couldn't think of a better way to do that than to ask some people whose words you may have already read. They are communicators, influencers, and they were asked in the run-up to this Congress to write blog posts for the end of the Congress newsletters. So some of you may be familiar with some of their views. So we asked them to travel around the event. They've been speaking themselves at some event and talking about the initiatives of their own organizations. But we also asked them if they would come on stage in a moment and discuss with us what they will take away from this conference. So we hope in a moment I'm going to ask if Cozy Corner is ready for us, and then I will bring them onto the stage. As I say, I'm just going to have a little chat with them, get their impressions, and crucially, bloggers, influencers, call yourselves what you would like. I would like to know what advice you have for this room as we draw this Congress to a close. So here we are, ladies and gentlemen, in Cozy Corner, as I have nicknamed it over the last couple of days. Let me introduce our influencers, our bloggers, and ask them to join me on stage immediately as I introduce them. Rob Buurman, who is Policy Officer at the Flemish Federation for a Better Environment, Bond Beter Life Milieu in Belgium. Rob, please do come up and make yourself at home. Ranjith Annepu, who is co-founder of Be Waste Wise, a growing online platform for sharing experience on waste management globally. A warm welcome to you, Ranjith, as well. Clarissa Morawski, Managing Director and co-founder of Reloop, a platform for those sharing a common vision of the circular economy from Canada. Very warm welcome, Clarissa. Bilikiss Adebiyi, who is CEO and co-founder of WeCycler Corporation, a social enterprise working to provide low-income households with value from waste from the United States. A very warm welcome, Bilikiss. And last but not least, Lenkiewicz, who is a consultant on sustainable management, recycling and the environment from the United Kingdom. Hello to you. So, as I say, some of them may already be familiar to you. You've seen their photographs and you may have read their words. I want to dive in and I want to ask them not for the 10 things they've learned from the conference, but just some highlights. And Rob, perhaps on this first question I could start with you. What for you has been the most striking impressions of the last 3 days, the highlights, what the key things that you will take away from this? There's handheld microphones in front of you. Well,
first of all, I would like to mention that one of the striking things is that Flanders can organize an excellent conference together with the city of Antwerp. And also, it struck me that I really like ballet. I didn't know that before, but I thought it was absolutely great. But when we start talking about waste management, something that we don't often think about here in Belgium is how it is in other parts of the world. And I've seen some great examples also this morning from an organization called Close the Gap, and they're really working in the field in Africa to reduce waste there. And over there, it's very interesting to see that it really helps, not just for the environmental benefits, and I work for an environmental organization, for me that's very important, but also on a social level, and it really helps the local people, and it helps against pollution. Possible health problems are prevented, and I thought that was really striking and a really great example.
Okay, so thank you very much for that. Crucial, we've been discussing quite a lot who should do what to tackle this issue, and I mentioned earlier about the role of policymakers and the role of industry. That bottom up, those local growth initiatives and those co-benefits you were talking about. Ranjith, for you, the most striking highlights of the last 3 days?
Running from session to session, trying to catch up as much as possible, and stumbling upon chairs and making noise unintentionally, so I think that's the best part. First of all, thanks to Antwerp and thanks to Phil Palin, for making a really new type of ISWA Congress. This is very different from the previous ISWA Congresses. And for me, the most important thing that I saw during this conference was I saw a lot of young people enter waste management. Until a few years ago, it was just chemical engineers, environmental engineers, or civil engineers, just a lot of engineers entering waste management. But now we actually see people from a lot of other facets of life, entering waste management, trying to do something different. So I think that was extremely important takeaway for me. There's a huge change happening around the world, and I think in waste management, I think this is a good change. And I just add one more thing, which is the use of online tools is also increasing. And I think the information technology, the revolution has definitely hit waste management too, and there's just a lot happening. So that's what I learned.
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you very much. Clarissa, your highlights, your strongest impressions.
Is this on? I think, first of all, coming from North America and having an experience in Canada and the United States, what struck me was that we are dealing with the very same issues that you're dealing with here in Europe. So many of the things that I was hearing over the last 3 days, we are struggling with the exact same issues, which for me is maybe a good thing, because at least I feel that I can contribute in a meaningful way. I was also struck, having worked in this industry for 20 years, 10, 15 years ago, the Waste Management Association was really a function of companies that dealt in waste. And now that industry is really expanding to not only recyclers and composters and digesters, but also moving even further upstream to, I've spoken to a number of companies that are dealing in reusable goods and waste prevention efforts, and that's something that is new, and it's nice to see that we're seeing businesses and economic stimulation from these sectors that are effectively moving up the hierarchy.
Okay. So becoming an increasingly cross-sectoral issue and generating all those co-benefits we've been talking about. Bilikiss, from your perspective, what will you take away from these 3 days?
I definitely agree with Clarissa. It's very important for us to realize the importance of waste management to the economy. And I was really struck by how important, how people like Philip Hill and the Vice Mayor of Antwerp, how seriously they took this conference. And I really would like to see more of that. I'm from Nigeria, and we don't see enough of people realizing that waste management is a very important field. I also was really excited by Dambisa Moyo's talk on why waste management has not been seen to be an important problem. And I got some tips and tricks that I'm going to use going forward.
Okay, thank you. And I'd like to get your opinions on why it's so hard to push this issue up the political agenda in a moment. But let's capture one more highlight. Zoe, what for you?
Okay, so first of all, as well, I'd like to say thank you very much to the organisers of this conference. It's been a really fantastic experience. And to everybody that's attended as well. It's just been, really impressive event. So thank you. I think the thing that struck me most, and it was alluded to right at the beginning by David Newman and David Wilson as well, in terms of the Sustainable Development Goals and how waste really is a cross-cutting issue. It's no longer the niche issue that it might have been considered 10 or 15 years ago. I think people across the board are becoming more conscious of how proper waste management does affect not only the environment, but it's the environment that people are depending upon for their own health and well-being. And the fact that those topics are so interlinked means that I think that the waste managers across the world have enormous potential to do good over the next coming years.
So if it's not a niche issue anymore, if people are beginning to recognise this cross-sectoral aspect, these knock-on benefits for so many of the challenges we face, why do you think it is so tough? Bilikiss, you said you were very struck by what Dambisa said there. Why is it so hard to push this up the global political agenda? And linked to that, Ranjith indicating there, you said young people coming into the sector, beginning to work in it. Does that suggest the image change is already underway? But Bilikiss, you mentioned it, so why do you think it's so hard?
I think, just to be like Dambisa, to be a little bit, to go against the grain, we just haven't been bold enough to really seize the opportunity to say, look, waste management is important. We really need to push. And I think people like, policymakers need to realize that they need to help people connect the dots, around waste management.
Yes, please.
I just want to follow up on that. I completely agree. And I think one of the key problems and why we haven't moved forward on waste management is a cost issue. And we look at costs in a very narrow frame of mind. And what we have to start doing, and we're starting to see it, and I've seen it at this conference already, is monetizing the external costs. So as an example, we heard about litter. We heard about a cost associated with dislocating or people's well-being be affected. You can actually monetize that cost. And if we can start to include monetized, well-done external costs and lump them in with the total costs, we'll change the financial picture. And it'll be a much more convincing financial story for policymakers to really push waste management forward.
Thank you. Ranjith, you raised this issue of young people. Does that suggest that this image battle, if you like, this seeing waste as wealth, as a resource, is already beginning to be won? Can we take optimism and hope from that?
I have 3 points to make on this, if that's okay. Yeah. So, first of all, people say waste is wealth. Waste is wealth when there is price on the pollution, like Clarissa said. Well, let's leave it there. And then the second point, when it comes to the priority, David Newman spoke about it. He's been speaking since he became president about how waste management does not have enough priority on the political agenda. And we are talking about how cross sectors, are gaining more interest in this. And you know how a caterpillar moves? It moves half of its body first, and then takes a while, and then the rest of it moves later. I think that's how governments move too. Some of it moves ahead, and then the rest of it moves next. And caterpillars are also known for their pace. And that's how change also happens, sometimes slowly, but I think in this case it's happening pretty slowly. And finally, leaving all the external reasons why waste is not a priority, something internal is the waste management sector is very segmented globally. And it's also very segmented within the waste management sector. Recyclers are different from waste-to-energy people. Landfillers are different from composting people. So there is a lot of segmentation. And only when we actually together come as one community and include everyone who's coming in, this is a great opportunity for us.
So this word integrated that has been coming up time and time again, and international community, we don't have it yet, we need to build it. Rob, you wanted to come in, short one if you would, because I want to bring you to some challenges now.
Yeah, I would like to say that I do have the idea that waste management is actually in Europe pretty high on the agenda right now. We have the circular economy package. That is fortunately not withdrawn, but is still very much alive and kicking. And but with these policy discussions, I think it's very important to realize at some point that we have seen a lot of good initiatives of companies in the circular economy, but we also have to enable them to make very good business in the circular economy. And to do that, we really need to change the total economic structure of the way we do business. Right now, it's still much too profitable to really to do business in the linear economy. So we really need to tackle that. And so that's also why I'm very happy that David Newman said in the beginning that we need a carbon tax and we need it now.
And we heard that quote repeated in the video of events. Okay, I want to move on to the future. And the challenges ahead. What do you see, drawing on what you've seen as the highlights, the most important issues of the last few days, are the key challenges, both for the industry itself, but also for policymakers? What do they really need to confront? Who would like to come in and identify a challenge for me? Bilikiss, what are the most important challenges from an international context?
I think we need to realize that, like you said earlier, that you said Europe has really done a lot of work around waste management and in the policy agenda, but in places like Africa, there is nothing going on. So we, like Ranjith said, we need to have more integration. We need to identify areas where there are a little bit of limitations and try to support that. As policymakers, we shouldn't just figure out policies just for Europe and say, hey, we are successful and tick that box. I was struck by, one of the big goals of the conference was moving from 50% recycling to 70% recycling. But in places like Nigeria, we are under 10% recycling. What's going to happen to us? We need to think about that. How can we get everyone to recycle? Because it's a global stage. And if Europe only gets it right and the rest of the world doesn't get it right, then we're not successful.
And one thing we have been discussing this morning when we talked about the international context for all of this is how do you enable developing countries to leapfrog some of the stages that those who are further down the road took? How do we shorten the cycle? Somebody said earlier it took us 30 years to get here. Let's not make it another 30 years for countries like yours. Zoe, you wanted to come in here.
That's right, thank you. I think there's a big case here for capacity building, particularly in developing countries. Much as Bilikiss is saying, and David Newman said earlier this week as well, it's all well and good having this big circular economy package in Europe, but it's a global world and carbon is a global issue. And actually, perhaps if we were to spend just a portion of that money on supporting waste management in developing countries, we would have a much more significant impact on greenhouse gases, which is the whole name of the game, right?
So listening to the debate, Clarissa, Rob, Ranjith, what for you, when you've listened to those discussions, what did you identify out of them as the biggest challenges? Clarissa.
Well, when we talk about circular economy and managing resources in the best way possible, I keep focusing on this need to preserve the quality of material. So if you have high quality material, it's going to recirculate in the economy over and over, it's going to be worth more, you're going to get better economic value out of that material. And I sometimes worry that there's sort of this interesting dynamic where we're looking for a one-stop solution. If we look at household waste, we're looking at doing it all in one system, because it's the easiest, it's the economically most feasible, but it also puts us at risk. We saw in October 2008, the market crashed, and there were hundreds and thousands of municipalities and material sorters that were stuck with material. We're seeing a similar, not as bad right now happen. So we have to set up these systems where we are focusing on quality, we are not putting all our eggs into one basket, we have strategic material-specific or product-specific strategies to deal with waste, and we can't sort of look at this as a monoculture kind of solution, because it does expose ourselves to risk.
Okay. Can I just ask, did anybody coming in here, you all work on these issues all the time, you think about them all the time, did any of you change your view or see new challenges that you hadn't thought about before you came, Ranjith?
Talking about changing our view, many speakers mentioned how in developing countries, the first priorities that they need are food, water, and the basic necessities. And waste becomes the second priority. And then we hear this over and over again from people. And it took us a while for the industry to get to this insight. But I actually changed my insight after coming here, after looking at all the entrepreneurs in developing countries. And let's take the example of Bilikiss Adebiyi. Just ask her, when in Nigeria, in a poor income house, in a poor income community, why she is doing waste management as opposed to providing the other basic needs. Just ask her, and then you'll know the answer. It's different. As long as we look at people, as someone who's waiting for a solution, then you say, okay, we have to provide them these first and these next. Bilikiss?
Bilikiss, would you like to respond on that?
Yeah,
why waste management?
Absolutely. People really need to, like I said, we're very powerful, and we need to realize that waste management is important. Having a dirty neighborhood contributes to pollution, to poverty, and people need to see that having proper waste management actually takes people out of poverty. We've helped about 35,000 people in Lagos realize that cleaning up their communities, recycling is wealth. Waste is wealth.
Okay, I want to ask you to do two things by way of ending this discussion. And the first is to offer some advice to this room in terms of what people, as they go away from here today, what should they do? What should they focus on next year when the Congress meets in Serbia? What issues should they focus on? And then, by way of a conclusion, I'm going to put you all on the spot and ask you the first thing. But first of all, who would like to give some advice to this room on what they should do when they leave here and where this focus should be a year from now when the Congress meets again? Zoe, you wanted to come in.
Okay, thank you. So one of the highlights for me of this event, as I'm sure it has been for many of you here, if not all of you here, is the new connections that we get to make, and the amazing initiatives that are going on all over the world, and we've all swapped business cards and so on. Well, let's not just let those business cards rot in the corner of our desks. You know, let's make contact with each other through the year, learn from each other, share those experiences, use social media, use the platforms that we have available to us so that we can accelerate our learning together as a global community to tackle a global issue.
Okay. So echoing that, collaboration, cooperation, partnership, make it happen. From here, Clarissa.
Well, one of the things I do a lot of work sort of lobbying at the EU level, and I keep hearing this from MPs, commissioners, is they keep saying, you know, bring me a delegation of businesses that can benefit from a strong circular economy package. And there seems to be a disconnect because I'm looking around the room, although I can't really see anybody now, but I mean, there's a
You have been looking around the room.
plethora of examples of businesses that will their businesses will be improved and expand if we see proper policy being put in place. So there's this disconnect. There's a disconnect between, you know, Juncker and his government and really hearing that this is a package that is good for European business.
Thank you very much. Ranjith, you wanted to come in with some advice.
Advice for next year and for everyone in the room. Short answer, encourage entrepreneurship. And let me just explain why. I was talking earlier about one of the challenges in the world for the waste management sector is what David Newman said, which is how do we improve waste management systems in developing nations so that they don't impact public health, environmental quality, and the resource efficiency. And coming back to what we said earlier, as long as we look at people as someone who are waiting for you know, some kind of, as refugees, we're thinking in a different way. But entrepreneurs are actually changing it. You know, they're actually making changes without having to wait for anyone else. So one advice, all of you have power in whatever job positions you're in, and you can definitely encourage entrepreneurship, create systems and structures to encourage entrepreneurship.
Okay, right. Your personal priorities. For each of you, there was a question yesterday morning when we had the astronaut and the deep sea diver and the polar explorer. One of the young students, and we had many students here for that session, some 300 from schools around Flanders. One of them said, what's your advice to me? What do I need to do as a person? For each of you, your personal priority for action to really accelerate progress in the way we've been discussing. What for you is the most important priority of the future? And you have about less than 30 seconds each. I know it's terribly unfair, but as I've been saying throughout the event, think of it as the elevator pitch. You get into the elevator with the politician, and the politician says, what do you want me to do? And I'm getting out on the 4th floor. What would you say is the priority for the future? Rob first, and we'll go down the line.
Well, this links up perfectly to what I just said. I think to increase entrepreneurship is extremely important, but really to increase circular entrepreneurship, because that's what we're really talking about here. To do that, we need to make resources. I mean, we can talk about that resources are valuable, but we need to make them economically valuable. And we do that by cutting away some subsidies that are stimulating the linear economy, and we need to put taxations in the right place to stimulate the circular economy.
Thank you. Ranjith.
Jacki, in the previous session on international solidarity, when you asked what is international solidarity, everyone said, okay, you know, this is what developed nations should do, which is exchange information. And for me, that's extremely important. Provide everyone with high quality information and let them use that to find solutions to waste and through waste management to other concerns. Yeah.
Clarissa.
I'll keep it short. We have to focus more on waste prevention.
Okay, thank you very much. Bilikiss.
I'm going to focus on education. There's so much talent, so much information in this room. I've been struck by the wealth of knowledge here, and I'm just going to put some time aside and learn from, you know, all the experts that are here.
Thank you very much. Zoe, you have the final word.
Okay, and probably predictably being a communications specialist, I would say communication all the way, sharing knowledge, capacity building, enabling people to make that change, to be entrepreneurs in their own local environment. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, will you join me in thanking our influencers, bloggers, communicators, not just for their interventions in this fantastic short debate, but also for stimulating our discussions and our thinking in the run-up to the Congress. Thank you all very much indeed. Thank you so much.
Very powerful, very inspirational. Thank you to the 5 bloggers, and thank you as well, Jacki Davis, of course. And now it's